Kilimanjaro.
Hello, my name is Jim Gurman, and today I'm going to be talking about a little bit of a controversial topic, and that is where are things made. So for most of us here in the US, we like things to be made in the US. We think that's the best place. Everything that's made in the US is the best. It has the best quality. We like to keep the jobs in the US. I suspect that's true for most countries. The people living in Germany want all their tools made in Germany. People living in Austria want all their tools made in Austria. Same thing for all the various different countries. However, most tools aren't made in the US or Germany or England. They're all made in China. Now, the quality of tools made in China can vary. Most people tend to think that everything made in China is a piece of junk. Like this Harbor Freight nailer, made in China, pretty much a piece of junk. However, it's not true. This Milwaukee drill, made in China, very well made, very nicely made. Everything feels really nice, it fits together well, and works really well. However, some things aren't made in China at all. This Max framing nailers, made in Thailand. This Festool sander, like most Festools, is made in Germany. And this ratchet here is made in the US. This ratchet here, however, is made in China. And that's going to be our subject of today's video. So we know that a lot of things that are made in China are junk. Like I said, this Harbor Freight nailer, piece of junk, made in China. However, some of the things in the world with the tightest tolerances, particularly your phone, is probably made in China. This is an iPhone, it's made in China. The tolerances on the inside of this iPhone are ridiculously tight. They're far tighter than anything in the aerospace industry, the automotive industry, anything like that that's made in the US. These are tighter tolerance on this. Obviously the tolerances on this, not so tight. However, it's really difficult to see how well something is made in China versus the US because frequently you can only buy things that are made in one country. iPhone's only made in China, this nailer's only made in China, this Festool sander's only made in Germany. However, recently, Craftsman has started making their ratchets in China. They used to be made in the US, like this one that I recently purchased, made in China. So we can use these two ratchets to see if the common belief that everything made in China is worse than everything made in the US holds true or not. Let's take a closer look at these two ratchets. So this one here is the one that's made in the US. You can tell, it's right there, it says USA. This one here doesn't say anything. Doesn't say made in China, but that's where it's made according to the packaging on the box. So overall, they're pretty much identical designs. It was clear that the same engineering was used to make both of these in almost all instances except for the head here, which I'll get to in a minute. This forging here looks to be identical. The reliefs here, they all pretty much match. The only real difference is the lettering here and here is a little bit different, and the lettering on the other side is also a little different. The heads here, this one is a little bit of an older design. You push the button on the back and it releases this ball to let the socket come out. Same thing on this one here. However, when you push the ball down here, this little pin pops out the bottom, which helps push the socket off, which is a little nicer. A lot of sockets it's not going to do anything because there's a hole there, but it's a little bit better of a design. But that has nothing to do with the manufacturing itself. So this one here has more of a brushed finish. This one here has a little bit more of a polished finish. I would tend to say that this looks a little nicer. You may think a little differently. Overall, though, they're very similar. This feels exactly the same. Both of them feel, nice to use. The only real way to tell the quality of the metal used is to do a tensile test or a strength test, some sort of testing on the metal, and I don't have the equipment to do that. That being said, there is a couple differences. So on this one here, the edges here aren't rounded over. This one here, the edges are a little rounded over. That means that when you go to hold this one, it feels a little sharper in the hand. It's not as nice to use. It's not a big deal, it's a very minor change, but it's something that on this one, this is the one I'd grab for if it was the choice between the two. Other than that, that's pretty much the only thing. The ratcheting mechanism works just as well on both of them. Haven't had any problems with any of them slipping. Everything else feels nice. The switch works just as well on both of them. So the only real difference is the polished finish here and the sharpness of the edges. So I think that sharpness of the edges is due to the fact that the one in China skipped a step. They didn't round over the edges and they didn't polish the sides to put that brushed finish on it. Now that also means that they probably had a better mold because they were able to get a polished surface on here while this one had to have another post-processing step. But the end result is the one that's made in the US feels a little bit nicer. From looking at these two ratchets, we can tell that the one made in China definitely isn't as nice as the one made in the US. However, that's probably not because of where it's made. It's because of the philosophy of the company that made it. You don't make things in China because you want them to be really high quality. You make them there because it's cheap. And when you make something that's cheap, you tend to cut corners. If you're making it in the US, that means that your engineers and the designers and the marketers are all close to the factory. They can go look when something goes wrong. They can get in there and see it right away. That means that the quality control tends to be better. It doesn't have to be, but it does tend to be better. And it also means that it's more expensive. And it means that the company is willing to pay that additional expense to produce a better product. When things are made in China, it's a lot harder to do that quality control. It can still be done, as Apple and other companies have shown. However, it's a lot more difficult. And the company has to be willing to put in the effort to do that. And most of the time, when you go to build something in China, that's not what you're doing. So I hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.